So, man, you got to tell me, like, when you had to go and you found someone with like a little bit of pot on them, like, how did it feel? Did you know it was fucked up right from the start? Like as soon as you saw it, you're like, oh, fuck, man. Like,
we're starting right there, huh?
Yeah, of course we're starting right there.
All
what do you think? What kind of podcast do you think this is? We ain't got time.
Yeah. I mean, so I was never into minor drug offenses. I mean, I did cannabis when I was a kid.
Right.
I mean, of course. So I was never into that, thought it was part of the job. I think you kind of have this rationalization where it's like, we live in a democracy, you voted for these people, and police have this saying, and we don't make the laws, we just enforce them. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, it's my job, I'm not here to placate the politics or play that game. So you just do it. But usually, I mean, by the time I had time on it and I wasn't some, doughy-eyed rookie, then I mean, I never dealt with a dime bag or anything like that. I just moved on. That was irrelevant.
Right. Yeah. You just kind of didn't see it, wasn't there kind of deal.
No, I mean, I admit it was there. Just dump it out or just, play a game with it. Sometimes you might hold it over somebody's head,
right. A little bit of leverage.
Because what you can do is, like, that's how you do get some leverage, especially in the drug game, is say I would find you with something and then I wouldn't arrest you for it. I would just put a warrant out for you, or I would just write the warrant and let you see it, so that you knew that all I had to do was hand in this piece of paper for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depends on when the statute of limitations is, that I could arrest you at any point in time. So you can actually like use that as a delay to kind of.
So that's some veteran shit.
Yeah,
right there, that's some veteran shit. But I mean, at some point, that consciousness of, all right, here are the rules. Here's my job as an officer, but the rules are fucked. And that's a dilemma that anybody in service really has to deal with. It's the dilemma of a soldier. It's the dilemma of a cop. It's the dilemma of anyone who has a large infrastructure that's not exactly reflexive to the modern times because they're massive, like law governing bodies. You have to confront that at a certain point. And that's something that's a point of tension, I think, that probably a lot of people feel.
Well, it's definitely growing. A lot of people are understanding how the drug war doesn't work, but we still have this like entrenched mindset just in the country as a whole. Like, I mean, if you go to Iowa and talk to some 60-year-old person, they're still going to be in like reefer madness. And we kind of accept that and we expect that. But you can go into Baltimore and find a 70-year-old black woman, and she's also in reefer madness because they grew up under these social constructs that were just slower, they were misinformed, and now that we have the internet out, I think that as a soldier, I realized that our foreign policy and our domestic policy, they're like the same thing. Either way, I was a tool of the oligarchy, so to say, or however you want to define our country right now, to go out there and extract resources from oppressed people to strengthen our society. I mean, that is what we do domestically as police, and that's what we do overseas as soldiers.
Yeah, and it's tough because your impulse as someone who served in both fronts is to help people. Right. Like, and that's, I think, something that people can lose. Like, you have people whose impulse is generally to be a hero. Sometimes there's some, power games and power metrics, some, this is an opportunity for me to be the prison guard in that Stanford experiment and, utilize my sadistic, kind of tendencies. But that's by far and away the exception. Most of the time, it's just people who want to serve, who like have the impulse to help people, but then they get put in positions where the laws and the missions that they're going on are counterproductive in a whole. So like on the microcosm, the human is the hero, the mission is misguided.
Right, totally. And then you can kind of get into some consequential ethics where even if you want to do good, you know that system is bad, but if you're not there, well, then who will be? Right. So, people will stick around thinking that maybe they can be at least the lesser evil. And right now, I think like police are kind of trapped in that. If you're a good cop, really the best thing that you could do is try to mitigate the fascism as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then all the conscientious cops quit in protest, and then what the fuck do you have?
That's ineffective.
right. Like then all of a sudden it's like all the good teachers are mad at the education system, so they quit. And
right.
It's like people still got to go to school.
Right, so
like
what are you stuck with?
It's a fucking serious dilemma.
Right, and we're kind of like trapped in that, and I was really focused on that. Like that was my drive, is to try and see if I could bridge like this divide that we kind of have, where we're not like looking at reality, we're not looking at our society, we're kind of stuck in our own social constructs. And then like feels to me like since the election, like it's just gone off the rails that I can't even have discussions anymore. So now I'm stuck in this place where I have cops asking me what they should be doing, activists asking me what they should be doing, and a reality that doesn't enable any of them to do anything. And neither of them are really willing to take any risk.
Well, I'm so glad you're on the podcast to give us the solution and the answer to those questions. So go ahead.
I certainly do not have those answers.
What? This is bullshit. This is bullshit. Cut the podcast. We're out of here. No, yeah, those are impossible questions at this point, and it's just the key thing for me that I always focus on is lawmakers and politicians. They always lag. Like they're always something that's retro. They're retro. They're like lagging behind the times. And what leads the times are these movements that eventually the politicians will catch up to. Like we imagine that there's going to be this hero that leads from the front, this George Washington motherfucker that's going to come and and then come and have really clear logic and compel and actually move the world forward. That's just not the political landscape that we live in right now. The best we can do is to get someone 10 years behind our time instead of what we have now, which is like 30 years behind our time or whatever. It's like how just shorten the amount of lag. That's just the way it goes. So the key is we got to start changing the ideas of those people in Iowa, those 60-year-olds in Iowa and the 70-year-olds in Baltimore, and which is hard because people get stuck on their shit.
Yeah, they're totally stuck and wrapped up in it because we're almost telling. I feel like. Okay, science has gotten us to this point where I think everything is too delayed. So that even by time a scientific study is completed, you can only say that this was true at that time under those circumstances in that environment, which was often 5 years ago. And in the age of chaos and rapid technology advancement, 5 years ago is a fucking century, to us now. So like think about going back in technology to a cell phone from 5 years ago. Like, dude, I do not want to use
those round ass
right.
iPhones.
That's crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Like that's crazy with those slow internet, 3G. Come on, I'm not doing that crap. Like so, everything is delayed, and now since we know this, we've gotten to this point where we say, okay, the scientific method has shown us that all these things in the past are actually what you knew then. So the best you can do is actually inform the decision makers who are looking to the future. But we have a kind of social construct of conservatism that's like the what is it? It's not the Pilgrims. What's it called when you're a Puritan kind of roots where we're stuck in that authority comes from the past, and it does not. Information comes from the past to fuel. We need to go where the puck is going, not where it has been or even where it is. And like activism, for example, is stuck on this history competition of who knows oppression Olympics the most, who can describe oppression the most, but who out there
Olympics.
Yeah, who out there is looking to solve oppression, right? So if you're Sean King and your entire career is predicated on oppression existing, every incentive that you have in the entire world means that you are going to set a tone and a narrative that assures that oppression will continue.
You're agreeing with the oppression, with your consciousness, with your voice. It's like you're creating a chord with that mindset. And it's another one of those tricky things because yes, oppression does exist, but there's two ways to approach it. One, you focus everything on the pain. You focus on the victim this, everybody's a victim. Let's highlight these victims, focus all of our attention. Or you focus on, hey, look, there's some unconscious people who are asleep to the fact that these people that they are oppressing are actually the same as them, probably because they don't feel enough love, probably because they've been traumatized, probably because they've been hurt and they've been misguided. Let's try to wake these people up, and let's also wake the victims up and let them know that they are not vulnerable. They are not a victim. They can't be oppressed without someone else's permission, not in spirit, maybe in body, maybe in their bank account. But that shit doesn't matter because that's just a flicker in the fucking dance of time. What really matters is who they really are, that force of consciousness, that, eternal traveler, and that person cannot be victimized. So let's focus on that. And then but that's not what we're doing.
Right.
That's the opposite.
I went, so we traveled to like 42 different cities along with the Vans Warped Tour and some other traveling, trying to make some connections with activists and police reform people that were interested in the discussion to see what it is and pathways to go forward. But what I really learned during that that time was even my bubble in the coasts and the idea of where I am in kind of like liberal surroundings. And when I went out there and traveled like through the Midwest, through Ohio and all that, like, I'm sorry. I mean, I agree with Chappelle. Like, I didn't see deplorables. I didn't see people who were racist. I didn't see these ideologies. I saw people with the exact same complaints, viewing the exact same oppression and you know, the inequalities of life. And in West Virginia, I saw the exact same poverty and oppression that I see in Baltimore. But those groups are fighting against one another with the exact same words. And when I tell one, like, look, the other one's the same as you, and I tell the other one, look, the other one's the same as you, and you're actually, like, if we can be this team, then we can really fight and be what America is trying to be. But instead, we're like getting mad about the other person just being slightly different than us. And it's that tribalism, that categorization. So, you know, race is a social construct. It is. You know, racism is an action, and race is a constructed categorization that we have. And with that categorization, as long as you say, and it's hard when you're talking to the oppressed, it's hard to say, like, look, as long as you keep saying, because I'm black, you sow the exact construct that will assure that this continues. And when you go tell poor white people, as long as you continue to be entrenched in this conservative ideology, you will not be looking towards the future where we can improve and unite together and all be one tribe, because we are all in America in the same society, and we're all in the same states building the same thing. We are team human, team earth, not team artificial boundary that you wanted to put across some river that somebody, again, 100 years ago told you was relevant.
It's just this arbitrary dividing line. Like you do an ancestry test and you get all your races and all your things. Like, we're not one fucking thing anyways. Maybe maybe we're a little bit more. It's all a sliding scale anyways. Like, we're all cousins. I did a podcast for this guy, AJ Jacob. He came out with this book called, I think it's something like It's All Relative, but basically everybody is a 60th cousin of everybody else. Like, we are literally all related. Like, and all of our DNA is shared. All of our ancestry is shared. Like, everybody through marriage or blood is a fucking family, you know? And so all of these arbitrary lines about all of these things, they're not real. They're just kind of made up structures in people's heads anyways. And it's just an opportunity to call someone out as different than you, which is a way that the ego can play this game of superiority and dominance. Well, I have to be dominant over somebody, so I'm going to make them different and make me dominant. But it's all bullshit.
Right. So I'm watching media and the people that I go with and like try to talk to, and you think are like the pathways to get discussion and public things. But then the left media is calling like Trump supporters idiots and talking down to them. When, if you are ever taking the moral position, you should be the one that's not throwing out insults at everybody and trying to throw everybody in prison. So how can you be against the prison industrial complex, but yet root to put all your enemies into the prison industrial complex? Like, those are the things we're trying to work out right now. And I'm personally super stuck on how to get that now that are, like, I felt like we were having progress, but since the election, we've totally broken free from that. So I had to write a book. I've had to talk about policing. And I just, like, I feel like as a society, we have to fight kind of through whatever this thing is right now.
Yeah. And I think it's going to have to be more than words. I think it's going to have to be bringing back ritual again. Like, there's a place for ritual in our human nature that collapses these artificial boundaries. It's either going to have to be a large external force, like in 9/11, nobody was worried about race for like a hot minute, right? Because
a couple years at least.
Yeah, because there was some external force. In Independence Day, you know, when he's giving his fucking Independence Day speech, people aren't looking around like, oh, fuck, I got to fly that spaceship with a black dude. You know, like, nobody's saying that. There's aliens. All right, so we didn't need fucking aliens. Solution one. Or we need to bring back ritual, like in ancient Chavin, this culture in Peru. It's like one of the longest stretches in any area where they found no evidence of war. And part of it was they served this plant preparation called wachuma. We call it San Pedro because it got Christianized and they called it St. Peter, but whatever. It's really called wachuma. And it's a very kind of serotonergic, very heart-opening. You see the humanity in everybody around you. And they would offer free ceremony and ritual to all the travelers and everybody who came through. So all these potential warlords, after drinking the cup of wachuma with everybody around them, was like, oh, I don't want to kill these guys. I fucking love these guys. These are my brothers and sisters. Like, we're all same. And I think that's one of the ways that I'm actually hopeful that we're going to get there. And those are coming through, scientifically, religiously, like all the great plants are now coming back. And I think it's going to have to be a lot of people just sitting down, ass on the grass, ingesting some plants, or maybe doing some other types of rituals, breathing, or, fucking cold immersion. I don't know. There's lots of ways to state shift, but we're going to have to get back to some of that and have that in kind of consciousness. It's going to have to be a consciousness game.
I kind of I'm agreeing with you, and I'm really happy that you're saying that, because as someone that has been like an aggressive kind of pusher of agendas really fast, and I kind of come at things aggressively and force them down people, that one of the things that I've hit upon is that it probably does have to be slower. It has to be more human. And I'm butted up against this idea that humans are inherently violent. And that has kind of gone across our society. And that is completely untrue. The reason that we are at the top of the food chain is because we have had the most remarkable cooperation and peace from any species on this planet. If you are violent, you will die. And when you die, you do not procreate. It's not survival of the fittest. It's survival of the fittest. It's survival of the fittest to survive.
Yeah.
So, like, you have to be peaceful and cooperative. That same marvel when we look down at the ants and we're like, wow, like your cooperation and communication, this is ridiculous. We'll zoom out and look at the earth, and you would be like, oh my God, they changed the earth with their extreme levels of cooperation. But we focus on this little idea of peace. Or that we can be violent. We don't focus on this big picture of peace that you're talking about, and kind of the rituals that let us through and have that stability and familiarity of what human kind of existence is in cohesion. And we have that backed in the police sciences. So one reason why I had to write this book that I have to talk about is that as I kind of was telling people things like, look, we don't know how much crime is committed. Like that's like on step 10, where they're like, wait, what are you saying? I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, an arrest is a measure of a cop's activity, not a measure of a citizen's activity.
Sure.
That's a cop went out and did something. It has nothing to do with a crime being committed. We have no clue. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah. Like, so everything that ends, everything in criminal justice and everything in police data is absolute nonsense. We don't know anything. And they're like, wait, what are you talking about?
Yeah, because effectiveness of the cop is in the available resources. It's all variable.
Right. So a cop's purpose should be the elimination of crime. So his drive and incentives should be the elimination of his purpose. Right. And so if your job is to arrest people, well, your job is fundamentally structured to continue to proliferate your job and sow the seeds of crime, one of which being locking people up is known to cause. So we have three.
Same with the prison. If you're running prison as a business and your job in prison is to reform people so that they don't go back to prison, you're trying to push yourself out of business.
Right. So that actually, if you have a moral agenda, your moral agenda should always be to eliminate your purpose. Because you achieve
one
success.
day I want to walk through this prison and have no one in it.
Right. And they achieve that some places.
That should be the fucking goal.
Right.
But it isn't the goal if that's you got fucking shareholders and you got big money backing it, and it's
And we have three things that we actually know or correlated at least to crime that we have solid. The first one is environmental poisoning. So lead poisoning leads that thing. So if we were human and we were treating everybody with respect within nature, we wouldn't be throwing lead into our bodies, which is causing crime and escalating us from our inherently peaceful
that's really
position. The second thing is we see it in the sciences because of our social construct as the lack of a father in a home. But that's not what that is. That's an indicator of stability. So when you have a family and you have stability, then you have that ritual that you're talking about. You get up, you have breakfast, you go to your meeting, and that could be church. I mean, I'm going to go with you that your version of meditation is far superior to church, but whatever we need to kind of unite people, you have that kind of ritual effect. And the third thing is cops. So the presence of police increases crime, and actually by our measurements, the presence of police necessitates crime. There's no cops on Wall Street. That's why you don't have them being busted for crimes, though they commit a hell of a lot more crimes than any average citizen in Baltimore.
Yeah, because everybody's committing crimes. And it's just when the cops are present, then people are getting arrested.
Right. And if they're looking, so it's all a matter of looking when you're in a state of overcriminalization. For example, when we say things like I would kind of defend the police or something when they're like, how did they pull this cop, or this cop had no right to pull this car over? It's like, have you seen vehicle law? Like, you can pull any car over. It is absolutely impossible to drive legally. I mean, it's impossible to live your life legally. So it's only a matter of whether you're looked upon or not. And when you're kind of getting into this theory where you're like, you're telling me the only difference between crime is whether someone looks at me or not, whether I'm not an actual criminal. It's like, so yeah, if you look at black guys, guess what? That's who you eliminate. Label as black guys. If you look at poor white people, guess what? That's who we eliminate as criminals. We don't look at Wall Street, so guess what? We don't eliminate. We don't recognize them as criminals. So I had to go all the way back and write this book trying to explain like what free will is and what autonomy is and what the human nature is of how we can go about handling things such as witnesses. Like there's a chapter on witnesses, whereas we put people in prison now for, a witness says something. And if you have a witness saying something, that is totally one person's word against another. And then you are putting the whole force of the state under a condition that says comply or die with our allegations with this essentially a snitch, which we've already known as a proven liar, untrustworthy, because they just were untrustworthy to you.
Yeah.
So we're going to take that whole situation to put somebody in prison.
Yeah.
And that's
And then
wild.
if you have the finances to get a great lawyer and get all that, you have a greater chance of actually maybe manipulating the system to your favor, whether that is justice or not. Which is another one of the injustices.
So, Crime and Punishments in the 21st Century, it has a chapter that says the exact same thing you're talking about. So my argument is that public defenders should be what everyone gets.
Yeah.
So you can put a check on that real fast. If rich people, if you want to have a good lawyer, guess what? Everybody gets a good lawyer because we're all going to have public defenders and we're all going to be treated equally under that system of a comply or die situation against the state. Because then if there's any place where we should be equal, it's when the state's trying to put us in a prison cell.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, assuming that everybody can reach that just general level of standard where justice could actually be achieved, which should be the minimum standard of being a fucking
What
public
is justice?
defender.
That's a good question right there.
Well, that is also another very sticky question because I think, again, people trying to put things in box, guilty and innocent, like it's usually a spectrum, and it's just a really weird line where you draw the line as to where someone is, because we're all guilty of some stuff, we're all innocent of some stuff, we're compelled, we all were choice and compulsion and all of this. It gets very slippery, especially when your goal is punishment, not actually the benefit of all. Like in some of the Norwegian prison systems, where it's truly like they have art in the prison, and it's trying to rehumanize people instead of dehumanize people, so that they could actually get to a place where there are no prisons anymore. That people are actually reformed, rather than this 90-some% recidivism rate that we're looking at for a lot of criminals.
If you were a victim of a crime, like somebody close to you was killed, or so, however, how would you feel that justice? Like, what would that be? Like, what would the outcome of that make you? How would you feel that? I'm just curious.
Well, I had someone accuse me of out of the blue, accuse me of the most ridiculous claims possible, like a straight up reputation assassination attempt. And it was interesting because all the people around me, they wanted to fucking kill him. Like, all my homies were like, I'm going to fucking kill that guy. Like, he dead, he gone. And I was like, no, it's all good. Like, this is an opportunity for me to release my attachment to my identity and for me to practice forgiveness when it's the hardest. And like, you can make that choice to take it in, see this in the best possible light. Like, see the hindsight, like what you would look back at, and say the lessons you could learn. You can have hindsight now. Have hindsight as foresight. So there's an opportunity for that, and I'd like to think that. However, I also see what happens when someone fucks with somebody I love. That's way harder. Like, somebody does something to my fiance Whitney, it's fucking fire and guns. Like, I don't care. I'll stab a motherfucker in the throat. Like, that's my girl. So it's different. Like that human instinct of forgiving, like, oh yes, I see you slap my fiance in the face, and I see that you were in pain for doing. No, fuck that. You're gonna die.
Sure,
so those are the impulse.
So that's you. So what if it gets into the hands of the state, though? So, like, if you want to kill, like, I stopped a guy once that had killed the person who raped his sister, and he did it like within hours. Finding out, hunted him down, killed him, and I feel like. Look at that. I was totally like, okay, this guy's obviously, you've served 8 years for that? That's preposterous. So, but that's you. So what would that look like when the state does it, though? When would you say, okay, the criminal justice system actually provided me justice?
I think you have to see, the perpetrators in some way, as you have to maintain and see the human in them as well, always, and have the goal for that human to still have a positive outcome, like change the punishment paradigm so that the idea is to get that human to a healthy place, and so that that human could contribute again to humanity and not ever do this again. You know what I mean? Rather than the punitive side of things, like this old Eye of Hammurabi kind of code, like you did this, you do this. Like the goal is to rehumanize everybody and recognize the humanness in all people. And I think that's the shift that I think ultimately when we look back at this 100 years from now, assuming that consciousness continues to elevate, which it seems to be going, I think that's the way that we'll do it. I mean, it is that Norwegian system. It's like, all right, I see you human, flawed, you've done this. There's no excusing this. It's not saying that this was okay. But we're also saying that, we need to rehumanize you and get to the root problem of what caused you to do this and use the information about what we learn about what caused this and apply this universally so that we prevent more people from actually doing it.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
The root. Like, what is the root in our crimes when we look at this? So if we think about the criminal justice system as it is now, when a police comes and investigates an armed robbery at a bank, they look at all the situations which led up to the robbery, all the actions, all the outcomes of what the person did, and then we try to regulate the person from doing those outcomes in the future. Mm-hmm. But we don't look at what caused these things to occur. And so there's always a root cause. And my argument is that we actually have two separate categories of crimes. We have contract violations, which are our agreements to not park somewhere or to not speed. These are violations. And then we have crimes of violence. So there's actually no such thing as a robbery. You would have a theft, which was a contractual violation, and then you would have an act of violence. And that act of violence, I think, is always a biological malfunction. And we will, throughout the past history, whenever we thought demons were possessing people and we find out that they're just having seizures and we have medicines for do that, we've had people that had pedophilia and they took a tumor out of their brain and it was gone. And so we know these things actually always end up with a biological medical root that we could be attaching and almost inoculating people throughout the entire country with a vaccine, but we do not even look to see what could be causing the violence to respond. So I'm trying to fight that justice is creating the situation where it doesn't occur again, which means treating all violence as a medical issue, not as a criminal issue. They're all just everything else is just violations of societal contracts.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You just got to look also at the flaws of the medical model and understand that medicine isn't even looking at the root cause of fucking problems anyways. But you're absolutely right, because a lot of times so much of this is based on trauma, based on some kind of traumatic incident in the past that's created this, when trauma happens in the brain, tries to wall off those memories, shift you from it. Your whole subconscious and somatic memory is pushing you away from any situation that might be similar. So if a man did something bad to you, it's going to be weird around men your whole life. And, you got to go back and create favorable conditions for the body to be able to heal that trauma. That's the work that MAPS is doing, so there's the trauma element. And then, like you said, there's toxin element like lead. I wasn't aware of that study, but it makes perfect sense.
You'll see it. I mean, it's by far the largest correlate there is. That's why New York is the safest city in the entire country, because in the 90s they fought lead poisoning and now they have lead at the lowest levels in the entire nation.
That's amazing. I've also seen studies too that showed that if you gave kids who are in juvenile hall, if you gave them a multivitamin regimen, that they were far less likely to come back and be violent. Just nutrient deficiency.
Sure, I think seriously,
another huge one.
Those I mean, I don't think that we're going to find out that's remotely fringe at all. Yeah. That's really going to be the solution to everything. I don't even believe that there's such thing as psychological trauma, and we have to get over the mind-body separation that we have. when somebody does something to you, that experience, even if I don't physically touch you, if it emotionally hurts you, you will have oxytocin, or if it's good, racing through you. You will have cortisol if it's bad, racing through you. And throughout that entire time, your biology is literally changing, and your memories will be affected in your brain the way, and that all is our equation. So I don't think we have free will, actually. I think we have a moral responsibility to create experiences that enhance those around us, and it's kind of a symbiotic relationship, because if we can't do anything that we haven't been exposed to. So an ISIS terrorist can't bomb somebody in the name of ISIS if the concept of ISIS has never been presented to them. So we're just the conglomeration of our biological upbringing, our root DNA, and then all the environmental experiences that happen to us, and they literally change our physiology to the point that if we're violent, it is literally because something affected our physiology that stopped our most core human principle, which is peace.
Yeah, I mean, and I have a slightly different opinion on free will, but I think you have to look at free will again as not a binary system. Again, that's another thing that people like to say: free will, total and complete, or complete absolutism, where determinism and you're just doing what your biological impulses are. It's, in my opinion, neither. It's on the sliding scale. It's what Dan Dennett in his book Elbow Room describes as like, you got like a little bit of room. Like if you're going to an ice cream shop and it really doesn't matter, you probably have free will in what flavor you choose, because it's a very minor choice with low consequences. You don't have a lot of fear. You know you're getting ice cream anyways, so your greed and hunger impulse is going to be satisfied. So yeah, probably you do have free will, and if you go choose the fucking Rocky Road or the pistachio. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's some kind of like, I fucking want this walnut, and my subconscious is saying that, and there's a little bit. But in bigger issues, yeah, I mean, we only have a limited purview of how much free will we have until we become hyper-conscious, hyper-aware, unified in our body. So we know what our body is saying. We know what our unconscious mind is saying. And then our conscious mind, we can expand that from maybe a 2% amount of free will. So only things right on the tipping point can we choose, to maybe it goes to 6% or 8% or 10% or 12%. And then the rest is just biology. And I think that's probably a more fair way to look at free will, is not this black or white thing like a lot of the time. So what we're saying is, on the criminal side, someone is tilted over where their range may be at the very best decision they could possibly make, utilizing the maximum amount of free will. They could barely just possibly not be a criminal. You know what I mean? Like maybe. But instead, we want to hit people right on that 50-50 line, where only their very worst choice and their very most compulsive, greediest, whatever would cause them to be a criminal. But them just running the midline is non-criminal behavior, and just shifting that whole spectrum.
Why would you think that there are those groups like the one you were talking about? And for one, I think ritual sows in those muscle memories so that you actually have like a human empathetic response for it. So that's why I would say you should, by encouraging people to go into such a thing, then you are creating an experience which will inform their experiences, which will actually directly inform their decision-making process, because you set in a ritual of human empathy as a muscle memory response.
Yep.
And I don't know where I was going to go after that, but I wanted to make sure I accounted for that aspect that I'm glad that you kind of see it that way. I don't think that the free will thing, it's kind of like weird. I just don't feel like we have any, once we start with free will, then we kind of start setting in this concept that I get to then judge you. And if you have a multiple choice and you subjectively think that this is different, like who the fuck am I to say that your rational choice was irrational? So it would almost mean if we have free will, then all of our actions have to be rational, and or all free will choices would have to be rational. And I don't see human beings very good at rational responses.
No, as I said, yeah, it's a very limited, it's
interesting though. I don't know.
I think part of this is the game of consciousness, the game of awareness is to expand free will. It's to give yourself more options. It's to give yourself more purview and agency over your life. Like if you're asleep, you have no free will. Like the people who are, morning pint of coffee, night, Ambien and everything else. Day, you're just basically like moving yourself for, fucking worse, whatever. Everybody drinks coffee and a lot of people take Ambien, but I'm just saying, like, you're jacking yourself up to just stay awake. You're going into the grind. You're, hitting your head with a sledgehammer to go to sleep at night, and it's just repeat, rinse and repeat. News on television in this cycle. You may have 0.2% free will, just enough to choose an ice cream flavor.
Choose that damn 0.2% to drag everybody in to those experiences. That will make us better. That's what I really like. Like you're saying with drugs or with cannabis or anything, I feel like the same thing. Like if you just dropped a whole bunch of blunts on top of the riot and let the cops smoke too, like they would fucking get how dumb all this is.
Yeah, the cannabis blimp just running around, just sensing instead of Batman. It's just fucking
cortisol levels go up and you just dropping
MDMA in really tense situations, like weed and other situations. Yeah, man. And I think it's just and it's universal too, like nutrition, ritual, all of these things. Like I went 30 minutes outside of Nashville and I go to this grocery store. And Nashville's like Austin, it's like super progressive, a lot of, it's like even though it's in the South, it's its own little hub. And so I go 30 minutes out and I go to a grocery store and I'm picking up some groceries because I'm staying outside of town. And I ask the person at the front, I go, do you guys have any almond butter? And she looks at me like, what the fuck did you just say? Almond butter? Like, I have no idea I was like, what? She's like almond flavored butter? And I was like, no. Like, they like use almonds like they would peanuts and they make butter. And she's like, whoa. And then she gets on the loudspeaker and goes, anybody ever heard of almond butter? And I was like, what the fuck planet am I on? Like, it's just almond butter, like, let alone asking for almond milk. They'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
You make milk?
Yeah. But that idea that, in that grocery store, they haven't even heard of that concept, that everything they have there is Jif peanut butter packed with high fructose corn syrup. Every label is brightly colored and just full of all of the preservatives and the dyes that cause, yellow 6 that causes hyperactivity and all the shit that, is part of the problem. They're just constantly ingesting it, and then with slow internet access speeds and the predominant, kind of media that's being piped in the area, they don't have nearly the chance that they should. And that's, again, going to your same point. You got to correct the bottom from the ground up, back in with new nutrition information, back in with new other mindset information.
Something's crazy I just learned is that the ADA still pushes a low-fat diet. And you talk about narratives going against science.
I know.
It's like, so we get invested in that. And that's kind of like what I feel like we're doing as a whole. Like, we're trying to tell our grandparents and our families, like, that everything they taught us is nonsense and we don't really believe in it anymore. And so even when we're talking about, Christians, and we're like, come on, man, come on, Sky Daddies, come on, guys. You're essentially telling your parents, when you laugh at them, that they were wrong. They're stupid for believing their parents. Their parents lied to them. Their presidents lied to them. And then, of course, they're going to be defensive. And so, like, I want us to all start talking about those same things that you're saying. Like, wherever you were outside of Austin, like, they have essential food deserts too. They're not as bad as they are in the inner cities, but they're sitting there eating absolute crap, being completely miseducated. And then we stand back as like elites that grew up on the coast and around money. And we're like, oh, look how dumb these people are. They're so fucking stupid. Look at them vote for Trump. Don't they know? And then they're like, vote for Hillary. And it's like, but don't you know that either one of them in charge is fucking you? Like, I mean, that's kind of what we're entrenched in, is that tribalism. And I really am desperately searching for a way to break us through that same divide where it's like, no, like, they have nutrition issues. And the same reason you want us to be empathetic for a poor black kid who was lead poisoned and ends up being killed in the back of a police van is the same reason we want you to be empathetic for the Bundy guy who was running away and got executed by the FBI for no reason. Like, can't we all see that this is the same damn oppressor that is kind of controlling us and keeping us all from achieving our potential as a society and interacting with human beings and growing?
Yeah. It'd also be good to, it's a shame that cops are like, in most situations, because everybody's a criminal, because we're all doing criminal things, and cops are supposed to enforce these things that we don't really believe in. It's created this antagonistic relationship. Like, the cops are the best thing ever when there's some shit that actually happens. Like when there's something that you really need a cop for, they're the best thing. Otherwise, it's fucking annoying. They slow down the roads. Like, you know, if you're out trying to party, it's like, fucking cops are here, buzzkill. You know what I mean? But like, someone robbed some machinery from my family house when I was like 12. And like, seeing those red and blues come was like, yes, yes. And then you get to high school, you know, and you're having a beer out in the fucking clearing somewhere, and the red and blues come, and you're like, no, why? You know, and it's just a shame that, you know, for most of us who are like maybe smoking weed or maybe going a few miles an hour above the speed limit, you get this like negative association with a group of people. And then I'm sure you guys have to feel that too. I mean, you have to feel that.
Aren't we supposed to hate the cops though?
Yeah.
I mean, like, fundamentally as Americans, like, isn't that the most American thing that you can do?
But I always fantasize about a situation where if all the laws were cool and the cops had the flexibility, kind of like in Israeli command. Like in Israeli command, if you're given orders and those orders don't make sense to you on the ground, you're supposed to disregard those orders. Like, that's not the American military command system. And the Israelis are one of the best military systems ever because they allow agency of choice for decisions to be made fast on the ground.
To make field leader decisions.
Exactly. And I think that's the situation where, you know, if you had emotional training, consciousness training, and where cops were like truly there, like they had your back and they weren't just, you know, they thought the same things that you did and there wasn't this divide. They weren't compelled to make any kind of arrests, you know. I think in the future that's the situation you want. And then at that point, anytime a cop's around, you're like, fuck yeah, sweet. You know, the cops are here. Like,
sure. So
excellent.
Why does that person need a gun?
Yeah, for the other people who potentially have guns, right?
All right.
I guess.
So that's where I'd like to see kind of the divide is that we would redefine policing into limiting policing to what it really is, because policing is a comply or die situation. Now, why do we need comply or die situations for your family's place to be investigated for a burglary?
Yeah.
Why do we need comply or die situations for a traffic stop? Right? So the reason cops kill people in traffic stops is because they're afraid that they have guns. In America, they're largely correct. And we sow in this fear of something that's going to happen that is, like, statistically, the odds of a cop being shot during a car stop are completely immeasurable. Like, they are non-existent. It is fundamentally zero, your risk level pulling over a vehicle. But we're stuck in this idea that cops, these enforcers, will go and they'll have guns. And a gun with an enforcement from the state means you will comply with me over so much as a speeding ticket, or I will fucking kill you. And I want to change it to the idea that there are times when we actually mean as a society, do this or we will fucking kill you.
Yeah.
So when you're holding your daughter hostage in a house with a gun next to her head, we mean, listen, or we're going to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
And that's the only purpose of police. I think only police we should be SWAT teams and everything out. And they do not handle calls. They do not make arrests. They do not do any of that. I think that we should have people on the street who enforce laws. For one, no consensual adult agreements. That's preposterous. We are not hunting people down for blowjobs or drugs or anything they do to themselves.
Can you believe that we still do that? It's fucking crazy, right? It's fucking crazy.
Roots, you know,
we're arresting people for giving each other blowjobs.
Yes, there's even been people of, you know, two dudes in Texas were arrested.
Two dudes want to butt fuck. Let the dudes butt fuck.
I hear you.
Fucking, it's their butt.
Right.
It's their butt.
But even if
it's not your butt.
The thing about the best trained police under our concept means that they will actually get those sodomizers
and put them in prison.
And put them in prison safely.
When they get butt fucked in prison indefinitely.
Right,
good job.
So bad.
Well, you've saved the world from butt fucking by sending them to the butt fuck capital of the world, prison. You've done excellent work here, everybody.
And now, if they don't want to go, should we kill them?
Yeah, kill the butt fuckers, all of them, for sure. Right. Fuck.
That's what our system really is. We're saying we'll kill them if they don't. If the butt fuckers won't go to the butt fucking house, we will kill them. And we're insane for that. Insane.
Oh, man.
So I really want us to get to the point where, like, if somebody doesn't want to pull over for a traffic ticket, that's okay. I mean, we don't need to have them running down the street, going across the side, and running over a 6-year-old child because as an officer, I was there when 6-year-old kids were killed. I was there on traffic scenes when you see this trauma, and cops are seeing this trauma every day. People are subject to that trauma every day. And why we would do things that incentivize traumatizing people, which again, I don't think is some bullshit psychological thing. I think you physically change people when you traumatize them.
Of course.
So we are actively traumatizing our citizens because we're so afraid of, like, I guess the others or the tribe or whatever it is.
It's the fundamental failure to recognize the fundamental metaphysical principle. There's like only really one you need. Like, all right, you want to talk morality, there's books and shit on morality. There's books on spirituality. You need fucking one principle. We're all the same, living different lives. That's it. You got that? And like everything else follows from that. Like, cool, got it. Oh, like, cops, same as me. Soldiers, same as me. Right, left, same. Different lives, different conditioning, different biases, different fears, different motivations, but same.
What would make us do those things, right? Because theoretically, if we were under those same circumstances, and we would probably do those same things.
That's Jordan Peterson's famous experiment where he goes through and he explains to people how they could become a Nazi prison guard. Like the conditioning that would have to occur, the right environment, this kind of recipe that would create that situation.
Yeah, Hitler, I assure you, if it always feels controversial when you talk about Hitler, but I guarantee you he thought he was doing good. He thought he was making a better world for his tribe, which is what we're all trying to do here in the same way. So what would make us feel this evil? Maybe like a Red Scare, or thinking that our president is actually going to destroy the world because, he's a reality star. Like, this is our first TV star as a president, or that this whole or that a president is actually in control and actually has that much power. I mean, Exxon doesn't give a damn about nation borders. We do live in a globalist society where the real power players, their boundaries are defined by where their business operations are. That's what has a true power play. Let Microsoft really want to change something. Let Exxon or Google really want to change something. It's going to change.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this is a time where it seems like all of the shadow is being brought to the surface.
And we're having a hard time choking on it.
Yeah, we are for sure, because it's coming out heavy and fast, and we're waking up to the realities of who we are, the realities of what's going on, and then we're overreacting, dramatically in all of these situations. But it's come to the point where it's now a spectacle, and at the point of spectacle, I think eventually everybody looks and goes, "This is a fucking circus."
Oh, I hope so. I hope they will.
And that's, I think, the only other outcome, other than, there's other more pessimistic views where it spirals into the Gulag Archipelago or some other dark pathway like that. But I think at a certain point, the spectacle just becomes so much that people are like, all right, I'm ready for another way. And then that other way, I see Gandalf riding over the hill with his fucking wand and his white cape, like as we're down here with the orcs getting all fucked up, like, hey, like you can wake up. You can wake up to who you really are. And here, let me.
Isn't that Plato's conundrum, though? I mean, this is actually something like the Enlightenment period kind of was discussing some of these issues, and we re-entrenched back into our nationalism. I mean, Plato was trying to get people out of the cave, although he said, some of these are not going to be able to get out.
But it gets better every cycle. That's the one thing we don't forget. Like we look at, fucking mental health care system so bad. They were lobotomizing people like within the last century. Sure. And that's where they take an ice pick through the corner of the eye and they just kind of thrash around a little bit. Electroshock therapy. And you look at like the levels of racism and like the levels of sexism. It's bad, but it's on this gradual scale of improvement. I mean, we were burning witches. What? We were burning witches a while ago.
Yeah, that's true. Even when we talk about police now, I have to say that, it's like, again, police are the least corrupt and least violent that they've probably ever been.
Totally. There's just more cameras now.
Now you just know and you can't continue to deny it. But one of the things I was doing is what you were just saying. I'm glad you brought up Jordan Peterson, because I started, being around Black Lives Matter all the time, I'm in those kind of bubbles. That's what I hear. And everybody's like, listen, listen, listen. And it's like, wow, who's listening to the other people? So I started doing things like listening to Peterson, listening to Shapiro, listening to all these other people. And it's like, oh my God, like the news that you're getting about what these guys said is so out of context. It is not at all the point that they're making. And no matter who any of them are, almost all of them, you can say, like, no, if you would have listened and hashed out this idea, you would see that he really doesn't mean anything too crazy from you. I listened to Richard Spencer just this morning, and he was making this ethnocentric country argument that he has. And of course, from his perspective, it's a white supremacist one where you create an ethno country. And it's like, but this is like actually the same argument for black segregation that I've been hearing from Black Power. Same thing. It's the exact same argument. I don't know, like, even how you're objecting to his argument, because he's saying you should have an African state, which is what you're asking for, and he should have a white state, which is what you're asking for. So I don't know how, like, if you're calling him a Nazi, sure, yeah, I'll agree with you, but he's actually trying to achieve the same goals and same argument that you were presenting for an all-black neighborhood with an all-black infrastructure, with all-black candidates and all-black mayors, that you only can listen to the black people from that neighborhood. That's just a micro ethnocentric country. Come on.
Which is a fucking nightmare, which is like the exact reversion back. But I don't think we'll get there. You know, there's a couple voices on that, but I think that the general swell is that one of, you know, recognizing these fundamental truths. There's a resonance to truth, and then there's a consequence to delusion. And that's why I think I tend to be more optimistic than most, is just because I trust the resonance of truth. I've watched enough people go through periods where they've come in unconscious and then become conscious.
History's on your side.
And then seeing how that sticks, and then also seeing the consequence of delusion. Delusion just creates more trauma, creates more violence and discord, and eventually that becomes intolerable. Like, that is why I think ultimately good wins, as long as we can keep this game from having one of these massive reset buttons, you know, that can potentially happen. And that's a challenge when you have like disproportionately bad things that can happen to the planet.
Sure.
You know, but
worst case scenario before was pretty minor.
Yeah, exactly. You know, an army walks this way and fucks up the people who couldn't walk that way fast enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little different now, but yeah, nonetheless, I think I'm cautiously optimistic. That
I think you're right. It's
place.
Just that in our positions, it's so easy to accept time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah. And I kind of got my headspace all in, like, I mean, like, the idea of like Tamir Rice being killed the way he was like, it just emotionally traumatic for me. It really changed my life course, watching the state do that to a child. I was like, still to this day, can't wrap my head.
Bring that, let people know what happened there.
So it was about 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And there was a call in a Cleveland park for a kid playing with a gun. The officer just gets that somebody's playing with a gun, and I want to remind everybody immediately that any cop that takes seriously what a 911 caller or the dispatcher says seriously, no, you're an idiot cop, and you have been on the job for about 2 seconds, because you never ever believe what the 911 caller is giving you. And I'll give you a good scenario that remind me of that, why you don't believe the 911 caller, because I got somebody killed because I believe the 911 caller. But so Tamir was in a park playing, it's on camera, and he's playing with a BB gun. He has it in his pocket at this point in time. When the police arrive, they speed up, total Dukes of Hazzard style. Passenger in 1.7 seconds arrives at Tamir, puts 2 bullets in him. He goes to the ground. They handcuff him. He's bleeding out as his sister runs across because they live there. The police tackle her, throw her into the car, handcuff her, let her watch her 12-year-old brother bleed out, choking on his own blood, while they performed zero medical attention on him or anybody else, just stood there with dumb, confused looks on their face. And then they don't get fired for that. don't get charged. The FOP stands up and says, this is police officers acting in the right way. And I have been a professional police officer for over a decade then. I wrote the book on how to professionally police. Literally, it's on Amazon. And this was the exact opposite. No cop, no military member, no one with a gun has ever been trained to act in this way. And to cover this up when a 12-year-old boy, a child, a citizen is the victim, like everything that I thought about policing and everything that I respected about the people who told me to go do this job, I was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And I need to find a way that doesn't happen again.
Sure.
And so when it takes a long time, it's easy. Does that happen to my 13-year-old pretty white blonde daughter? Not a fucking chance. I bet you she could stand on a park popping off a real gun and cops aren't going to shoot her. One look at her and you're like, I don't know. This guy is just going to have some connections, And so you're not going to go into a situation like that through rational things or through irrational things that we've all been put through in our social construct. So I want to change it so that absolutely never happens again. And that's what justice is and what I'm fighting for. And I don't want to be complacent in my privilege when I know that is always vulnerable. And really, I think it grows as the Orwellian police state escalates. You see plenty. Daniel Shaver was just all over the news not too long ago. If you're white, you are by no means are you safe. I think a pretty white blonde girl is still safe, but by no means are you. You are way too dark, way too hairy. Shit is not going to go well for you either. In a lot of contexts.
Pretty white blonde girl is safe from cops, but right. Is it safe from her neighbor? Is it safe from the babysitter who their parents have hired? The amount of sexual trauma for that same person is fucking astronomical. The amount of numbers and actually dealing with some trauma stuff and working through maps and starting to uncover it. And just as this conversation is coming out, so many fucking people have had to deal with it. All right, so different cross to bear.
Yeah, I totally think maps is critical too.
Yeah, different. Everybody has their own. Everybody has some of their shit that they have to deal with, and I think that's the thing that we all have to realize. We can all claim victim. We can all claim privilege. We can all claim this or that. It ultimately doesn't matter. What's inside matters, and that is where the playing field is level.
Yeah, so I guess you're right. Beings. Even if you're super rich and you're inequality, if we have that social construct of caring about other people, then the inequality of the system even kind of gets mitigated because the person will go out and do the good things if they see our constructs as the way you're saying.
That's it, man. It's just everybody needs the consciousness and all the wealth discrepancy. If you really love people and you realize that those people are the same as you and they could really benefit from your money and resources, you'll give that willingly. It's not about Bernie Sanders' plan to try and tax all the money away. You try to grab something from someone, what does that person do? No, motherfucker, that's mine. They're going to pull that away. They're going to move it offshore. You're never going to get that shit. But if you get that person to love everybody, to see everybody, as themselves, then they're going to willingly want to give that out.
That's a super good point. I feel like that was part of the message that I kind of got from the Midwest, was that how are you going to make an argument to take from the people when they don't have anything? And even myself, I have a decent paycheck but just for my retirement, but I can't help anybody.
Yeah.
So when I see in LA, especially the homelessness here, it's if I had the power, I would certainly do it, but I could get how people don't want to be forced.
Yeah. It won't work. That. It won't work. You gotta let those people, you just gotta open their actual care up, open their heart up, and using that metaphor, allow them to really give a shit, and then give a shit more than this kind of fear-based protectionism, ego-based, I need to be dominant, I need to be safe, I need to be secure, I need to have this much money. That all shifts. If you're with a bunch of people and you're right there sitting down next to them and you have 7 sandwiches and they're all looking at you sad, and you're all these are mine, and you just lick one and throw it away and throwing stuff off on the ground. Nobody would do that. But we do that because we have enough boundary and we have enough plausible deniability. But when you're awake and you realize, then you have way less of that, and then you start to dedicate your efforts towards where it can help the most.
Yeah, I hope so. People do seem to want safety. That seems to be a very key underpinning. So even when they want to do something that's oppressive, or they want to lock those people up, really, with that underlying core is to be safe, in themselves and that their children will be safe. I don't even know if people really look at like prosperity as much as we think, because there's plenty of very poor and incredibly peaceful societies in Africa right now.
Incredibly happy, yeah.
Right. And so we're definitely like our social construct of America is kind of messing with me and making me wonder how we get to those better places. And I love the way that you were definitely presenting.
Yeah, man. And I love the work that you're doing. You know, that voice is a fucking super important one.
The 911 call.
The 911 call. All
okay.
right. Yeah.
All right. So I was a young officer in a town called Pigtown. And it's because I used to march the pigs through there when they were taking them to the slaughterhouse. And so it got that name. And so I'm getting a 911 call that a man has a gun. And what does every rookie cop do? Yes, this dude's got a gun. I'm going to go jack him up, right? He's got a weapon on. He's going down the street. So I pull down the street. I see him there. I'm like, oh, there he is. Yoke him up. Put him up on the corner. Search him. Grab him. Go through all his pockets. Get everything. He's got nothing on him. And I was like, oh, bullshit call. Get in my car. And I roll out. I go 5 blocks down the street. He got capped. And I was used by whoever killed him to call 911 to make sure he was unarmed, because he was almost always armed. By watching the cops jack him up and search him, they realized that he was not armed. So obviously I learned from that, and in the future would never ever openly search somebody like that when I had a call like that. You know,
wow, that's some fucking real.
Right, but think about how easy that is to pull off. Of course, if you grow up in an environment where you're fighting for your life, that's an obvious, easy thing to do. Look at the dumb cop from the county who's lovely, would love to get a good stat real quick. He's going to jack this dude up. I make sure he's good, then I get him. And so we really have to think about like everything
some
that
Peaky
we're doing.
Blinders type of shit.
Right.
Right?
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders, fucking good. Tell us about your book, man.
Okay, so my book is called Crimes and Punishments in the 21st Century. And the reason I came back and wrote that is, of course, because whenever you talk publicly, you always end up making an ass out of yourself a few years later, because I used to always shit on philosophy. And it's like, I mean, you got a philosophy degree? Like, when you start imagining about, what is the nature of being? And I'm like,
I have a philosophy degree.
So
perfect.
So I'm like, shut the fuck up with all of that, right? So I get into my positions where I'm talking about policing and I'm trying to explain the things that we need to do going forward. And I realized, shit, nobody understands me because I have not explained my fucking philosophy. So I sat down and wrote a philosophy book based off of a modernization, bringing the Enlightenment period to criminal justice and explaining why, essentially, how we're animals and we need to treat ourselves as these biological beings, how free will works, how we need to deal with confidential informants, what justice system can look like that actually builds up a system in its fundamental principles, why we're doing this for each question. So it's broken down into 47 chapters of it'd be vague laws. Like what happens when a law is vague, or how do you prevent the law from being vague? When a law is obscure, what does this mean? Or for like judges, right now we have a thing where I have a magistrate's clause that I think we should have, where judges should not be able to interpret law. And that seems like a very conservative kind of principle. But what happens there is, if you philosophically think about what happens when a judge interprets a law, well, you end up with law being a complete oligarchy and completely obscure to the people, because what is criminal is judged by an individual who is of the elite class and is at their will of interpretation. And then they are interpreting other judges' interpretations. So you can end up with this continuing over-criminalization where, like, now you need a lawyer to even understand the law. And that's obscurity to the law. So
Right.
when you have judges interpreting legislation and you have obscurity, you create the tyranny. This is literal tyranny that we operate under, because at no point in time are you actually sure whether you will be arrested for a crime or not. And that is, when you talk about like affecting you emotionally and stress in your life, every single citizen in this country can be arrested at any single point in time. And if you don't, that's a pretty unsafe environment to be in.
Yeah, and also you know there's that study on the Israeli parolee judges that showed when they had their blood sugar swings were deterministic of whether they would actually grant parole or not. So it's not only their interpretation, it's their fucking mood.
So all
did their mistress say something that pissed them
course,
off that day?
Because
You're going
they're
away for life.
Human,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So do we want to say a human can say, no, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this in this circumstance, but not this in this circumstance, when we know humans are completely the worst eyewitnesses in the entire world. Like, I don't think we should ever have eyewitnesses. Like, I don't know how many eyewitnesses the society wants to settle on, but I tell you 1, 2, 3, I'm not even confident in that, because we have so much history that shows they will see whatever they want to see, because vision is an illusion.
Listen, I just went to Chris Angel. I still can't figure that shit out.
Okay, so that's a good example.
So
optical
there are fucking
illusions.
birds flying out of there. There's a fucking hot chick here, and then there's a motorcycle. I don't know what the fuck happened.
Right, so those optical illusions, we have to talk about that for human beings. So even, that's what I have to get into in the book, is even when you're talking about, well, the witness said this, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, that witness, when the cops said that they saw Tamir as being bigger and stronger and older, like, literally, they can do that. Vision is an illusion.
Yeah.
They can see somebody as a bigger threat. They can literally see them as a demon. That's what they can be seeing. Objective reality is not at all what we see. This is not a window. This is something that receives a tiny spectrum of light, converts that into electrical signal, sends that to our brain. Our biology and our past experiences translate that into something that we think it is. And then when Chris Angel stands in front of you, you're like, what?
Vegas!
And then he can tell you how he does it.
Yeah.
He can show you an optical illusion, explain to you how it works, and then you will still see the illusion, because guess what? You don't have any free will over your optical illusions or your vision, right? So you don't even have free will to what you're seeing. So even if you have free will, you don't know that your information is fucking worth anything, because you're just operating off of your best guess. And we must understand that we're all at our best guess. So even if you're talking about witnesses, if you have 2 witnesses, at best, you can't say that these people saw him. You can say their best guess is they saw that this person who was suggested to them as being a possibility that they were seen was identified. That is crap. Like, that can't work. Well, you have to really think about, like, what we mean when we say beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, we should not be putting citizens in prison cells or executed to death or anything like that when we cannot say for sure. And everything that we keep showing throughout history shows us that we're executing innocent people. Our country executed over 100 children already on death row for something. Death row doesn't work, and the idea that you're executing children who haven't even formulated the ability to be judged on their actions.
Fucking frontal cortex isn't even developed. Well, I'm glad you wrote this fucking book. Did you narrate it?
We are doing that right now. That is the hardest thing. So people that buy it now, they're actually getting a proof but a bunch of proofs that I sent in.
Okay.
Because we're sitting there reading it, and we're doing filming it. The wife and I are switching back and forth.
Cool.
And that shit is hella harder
than
I ever could have imagined.
I'm doing mine in like a month.
They
booked me for 6 days. I was like, 6 days, 8 hours a day. I was like, fucking 48 hours of reading?
So tired.
Like, Jesus.
3 hours, you'll be exhausted.
I know.
And you keep fucking up, and you're going to get so mad at yourself.
Yeah.
And so we're at that right now. We got to finish up the last chapters, and I'll have it on YouTube, and we're doing an audio book too.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for what you do, man.
Brother.
It's been a fucking pleasure dropping in with you, getting to know you. Thanks, everybody. Peace.